Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SSRG and Your View. We always talk about different things, but a lot of the time they are connected to social justice and social work because everyone here has a social work degree. And this is a social work month. But the angle that I want us to talk about today is when it comes to decolonization of social work and social work education. Because our social work education and practice in Nigeria is still largely Eurocentric. Our models, our theories, and our approaches are still very Eurocentric in its nature. And I remember during my bachelor's program, there was no single theory that was of African origin or even global south. It was mostly Western. And this is a significant problem. But I'm going to throw it out to my comrades and start by asking them, why do you think it's important for us to decolonize social work, education and social work practice in Africa and global south countries?
Okay, I will just go in to say that it's important because for us to actually tackle problems that have to do with our own realities, it's important that we are learning based on our realities. So, and I would say this problem is not just like social work problem. I would say like it's the global south in general because, or let me say mostly colonized countries. You get, because I think just last year, November, I think November last year, Nigeria reversed their indigenous
Curriculum.
language, no, the language policy. So right now in Nigeria, English is the only acceptable language in education.
Yeah. In
So
curriculum, in teaching.
yeah, it's the only acceptable language
So we
in
are
school.
getting worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we are going backward, and they attributed this to failure in examinations. So our own language or teaching in our own language is associated with failure,
Which
even
is
though there
wrong
is overwhelming research and evidence that children learn better in their
in
mother
their
tongue.
local language. Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like this is more of a structural, it's not like a social work problem. I feel like
I
it's
think even in
a
psychology and other
yes, it's
disciplines,
I think
there's
it's a
still
broader educational problem. And a lot of them is treated because I think about last week or so, I was doing a class on comparative education and looking at how why is it that most of these countries design their curriculum to fit why is because when you look at comparison in education, for instance, in the global north, it's always like comparing to another global northern country and trying to maybe surpass them or be better than them. But when you come to the global south, you are comparing with the global north. Why do
Not
the global south not compare with the global south?
global. Yeah.
And we see that we build our curriculum around trying to be equal to or trying to reach a certain expectation or trying to validate because we are always seeking validation. So I feel like this is not just a social work problem, it is like the educational system in general, and it have affected not just education but other facets of um, our society as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I Before I start talking,
You are
I want
talking.
to say, I mean, already talking, but like my head is cutting, and anybody in the comment section should help me. I've tried my best, and I feel like I'm about to break this
why are
laptop.
you asking them,
Why are
the
you
If,
asking
audience?
if
them?
there's a
They are not
technology,
part of your
if there's
problem.
someone that knows about technology that wants to help me, but
This is a very digital migrant. So he's asking digital natives to help him. But that's your
yes,
problem, TC.
I mean, but what was I going to say? As regards to social work, I think that one thing I was going to comment on is that there is need for indigenous practice, indigenous theories, and this
Why?
exactly why the reason is most of the contemporary issues we have in Nigeria, particularly, are actually as a result of colonialism, as a result of religious influence, as a result of all these Western imports. And if you're trying to solve these contemporary issues and you're still using colonial models and colonial
Yeah.
theories to try and solve it, it's just not going to work. So we need to come up with our own indigenous, rooted in our indigenous knowledge.
Yeah.
So
That's right, TC. Because Prince asks why it is important that we decolonize social work education. But I think this is something we've been talking about all the time. Just like you all have said, the realities we face in Nigeria and in Africa are not the same. Because, for example, I'm going to be very practical.
Mhm.
A lot of times we face things like people suffering because of corruption. For example, you graduate from school, you are not able to get a job because you don't have any connection to the people at the helm of affairs, and then you are facing a lot of problems at the moment. So this is something happening in Nigeria. The theories, the models, and everything we learn from the West are not designed to address the issue of corruption. Even if they are designed, they are not. The corruption here
our own
is not the
corruption is
same with the
quite different.
corruption.
It's made in Nigeria.
Our own
It's made
corruption is
in
completely
Nigeria,
different.
made in
So we
Yeah.
need
yeah.
personalized corruption models to be able to
To
address
address
this kind
them.
of
Another
we
thing
need to
again,
address
Nima.
them.
Why?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just say one more thing. Because I know
Okay.
you mentioned in social work education and teaching
And practice.
and practice, but
Practice, yeah.
specifically for education now, in research, I mean, we all know about, and I know, Prince, you've elaborated on this, like you exposed me to this the first time when I was exposed to research, snowball sampling.
Sampling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when we teach this particular research data collection method approach to students, we're like snowball sampling. First of all, there is no snow in Nigeria. What is even snow to start with? And you extend this snowball sampling to people who have not even been exposed to that reality. But if you bring it down to our cultural reality of mud, I've forgotten the name you call it.
Mudball.
Mudball,
Mudball sampling.
snowball, mudball.
Mud. We see mud every day in our
Because ọ bụ egwu eja ka anyị na-egwuri, anyị na-egwuri
And,
snow.
so
Yeah.
and just to
And
if you
it
teach
makes
that,
it difficult for students to actually
Grasp.
understand how do I place this theory into this problem that my client is facing, because the
Yeah.
problems your client is facing do not fit into some of these theories because they do not reflect the
yeah,
problems
and just to
that
conclude,
people you work
for a
with
second, all these things we've been learning in social work, when they teach you everything in school, yeah, the Western theories, Western models. I know that what I'm about to say right now is somewhat exoteric, so it might not be scientific, but it is a reality. For example, if you graduate and you start practicing social work in Nigeria, and the client you encounter, the main problem is that these people are telling you that in the village they use juju on this person and it's disturbing him. What do you do? Because you have no right to tell them that the problem is not juju at that moment.
Exactly.
You have to understand why they are telling you it's juju. You have to understand their own belief system. Otherwise, the intervention is never going to work out. So,
Yeah.
how do you think about this thing when everything is about, the
Yeah.
Western theories and that? But this
Yeah.
is the kind of reality we have now. Koroma dogo, this one, that. So,
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I also think spirituality in social work is becoming a thing, and it started from Africa and Asia. And this is where I want to come in. Scholars, educators, people in academia is a fight, and we have to be really rooted in fighting that. In all the research you are going to be doing, in all the specialization you are going to do, we need to save our culture, we need to embed it, we need to domesticate. And we cannot make the mistake of leaving those in the West, because that is what they are trying to do, to tell us or to produce the knowledge that we use to domesticate social work in Nigeria. It is our responsibility to fight the fight and insist, because it is not easy to explain this thing. Sometimes it's beyond understanding. We know how journals will reject your publications because it does not suit what they think should be normal. So it is our fight to insist this in conferences, because there are bodies where we can discuss this, insist this in conferences, publish books, and disseminate the knowledge like we're doing now in this podcast. We hope it reaches a large population. So scholars have to preserve this and insist on doing Afrocentric research. Thank God that most of us here are insisting on Afrocentric research, because we cannot be talking about a problem and we do not move quickly to the solution, which is documenting our own facts, our own truths, our own lived experiences through our knowledge production. And that is what we are circling back to, and we would continue to do that. Because, like, final thing, I'm talking a lot. Final thing, Emma said we have spoken about this a lot, but we should not stop speaking about it, even if it means making sure you tell one person. Like in my class, we talk about Afrocentrism so much, and we are very courageous to talk about it, because when you chicken out because you have a dwelling voice, you have theories that sound strange to you, but we come to say no, this is not how it's done in Africa, and your own is not superior. My reality is what is the truth. You cannot impose this to me. And I mean, they learn, because scholars should be open-minded.
I agree.
Yeah, and have intellectual humility.
I agree with Fidel, and I wanted to say that, you know how, like, in the West, if somebody asks TC, what's your name, and he says to Chukwude, we mispronounce it, and then we will try to pity them and tell them, okay, just say TC.
TC.
Instead of them forcing them to learn how to pronounce
it.
But for us, we would have to learn how to pronounce Schwansteiger and names like that. You understand? Yeah. So I think it's the same way when we present social Afrocentric and African-based approaches and models and thinking, they have to have the humility to try to learn it and understand how it works and all that. So, but I'm not going to go further. My question is, why is it difficult for us to decolonize social work? Why is it challenging? Why can't we do it?
It's simple.
Yeah.
Okay. Our education system is rooted in colonial. Yes. I think that's just the simple answer.
Mm-hmm. And because, also, continue, please.
Say what you want to say. It's fine.
If it could finish, it's Women's Month.
Sorry. I thought you already stopped. So continue, please.
Okay. So I feel like when you look at our education system, it is built on Western standard. And so you cannot have a faulty foundation and try to repair something at the top. Mm-hmm. So it's from the grassroots. So I feel like that is the reason why decolonizing social work education, or any form of education at all in the global South, will be a challenging task, because the foundation is already like shaky. It's not a good foundation to start with.
So, and of course, who are those? Oh, Emmanuel.
Continue. Continue.
It's Women's Month.
It's Women's Month.
We're not saying treat women, like, we are talking about fairness. So it was just fair Emmanuel goes first. That's what
I'm talking about. Lead by example. Yes.
Yeah. Nice.
Only women has this level of self-awareness to be like, you can go. If not men, they're gonna do muzzle.
I will tell you, I was about to take the center stage.
Okay. So I was going to say that I was going to align with what Hope said, because because everything in social work education in Nigeria is colonialist. But the angle I want to come from is religion. So what you ask why it is difficult. One of the difficulties is religion, but it aligns with colonization because it's also the colonial religion that is causing the problem. Now, calm down, just like I said the last time. I'm going
You're
to
telling
make
Fidel
it
to calm down, because her head is about to explode.
You guys should calm down. It is religion because decolonizing social work education has a religious underpinning. It has a spiritual dimension, which is very important. But the problem is that a lot of current social work educators do not accept the African spirituality that you need to bring forth for you to decolonize. I am not saying African spirituality is the only thing it takes to decolonize, but it is very important.
Or the only spirituality.
For example, we did a recent study, and one of our findings was that a lot of Nigerian social work educators think that African spirituality is diabolical. So if an educator thinks like this, decolonization is near impossible for this particular educator. So it is a big problem. Yeah, because you first of all need to accept that something is a problem before you start seeking solutions. So, yeah, make I
Yeah,
pause here.
I don't know. They called Fidel because I'm a Christian, and I also know that spirituality is big, and spirituality helps a lot in social work practice. Even in the acclaimed clients that you see, most of them survive because of spirituality, whether African spirituality or the Christian spirituality. How do you call that one? God Christian, Jesus Christianity. So spirituality is big on how people heal, how people hope, what gives people strength, what helps in their mental health. But what I wouldn't take is to call some things you do not understand diabolic, right? There should be a separation between personal life and beliefs with professional practice. And in everything anybody do, there is a person before a professional. So even if you go to African spiritualists, they are rooted in their African spiritualist before they go in to become professionals. But we must always strive to separate that. So, but to answer this question, it is also about leadership. Why we have refused to decolonize and move to what works for us. So what I'm talking about leadership is, for example, there is an example Ifechukwu gave about English being the official language of instruction. So the Minister of Education, did he do any research? Did he try to research and understand what is going on and what is the best practice before he changed that rule? Obviously, he did not, because it's not even Western research. It's even research. I am in the NGO space, and a lot of interventions we do, if you use the local language, that is when you make the most impact, both in the north, both in the south, in the east, and in the west. So you are wondering, how did this person get into this helm of leadership? Who works in his cabinet? So this trickles down to the leadership of social work in Nigeria. What do they do to produce indigenous language?
Can I?
I'm most grateful to Professor Koye, and she's very big in social work in Nigeria and even Africa at large, and the knowledge she's producing with even the recent book she published. And these are things that we need. But we have to have a central and a core leadership that insists. Because I continue to say, since my undergraduate, since 19 what? Social work has been developing in Nigeria. What is
But
that then? We need leadership that moves us from so many talking to instilling our own. You have to craft a path for yourself. And everything rises and falls on leadership.
to the defense, sorry, I'm sorry. Please
Everything
go on.
rises and falls on leadership, and we need leadership that insists on African conferences. I saw an advert about Afrocentric conference research, which is good. So these are the things that we want. When we craft that our part, people can be interested in us because we are speaking, and now they will listen. But if you don't speak and shout, this is where it's paining me, nobody cares. Everybody is inherently selfish. So our leadership should please carve a path for us. I'm ready to move that. We're already doing that. So carve a path for us and insist on our own conferences, knowledge production, and all. And if the leadership has error,
I'm glad. I'm glad you mentioned. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned insist on our own knowledge production, because I've just been ruminating over these things. I feel like for the most part, the consciousness of indigenous practice has grown in Nigeria and in Africa. It has grown, but it's something I'm thinking about beyond. Like, we have to give grace to our leaders. When I mean leaders, social work leaders in Nigeria.
okay.
We have to give some grace to them because they are trying.
Why?
Why is because there's something about a concept that is called Matthew effect. And I will explain. It was developed by, I think, Robert Merton, if I'm pronouncing his name
So a
correctly.
colonizer.
Colonizer, but the concept is important. Why is it important? He talked about how the Matthew effect is from the Bible. The rich will keep getting
Okay,
rich.
colonial religion. Keep going.
God, religion.
The rich will keep getting, but he was talking about oppression. So allow me land. the rich will keep getting rich and the poor will keep getting poor. And he used that concept in the idea of science and knowledge production. If you, as a researcher from a third world country or from a developing country, sends a paper out about something that has to do with our lived experiences in Nigeria, send it to a high impact international peer reviewed journal, they will reject that paper or they will not find it interesting enough. Therefore, the knowledge about indigenizing social work is not put out there in the international space. However, if someone who is in the US or in some other high income countries does the same thing that you did back in your country, and even sometimes less, that paper would get more, what's it called?
Acceptance.
It gets acceptance, one, it gets more weight, it gets more citations. So it's definitely a problem for Africa that we need to think about.
Okay.
Yeah, so we should have our own journal.
This thing Tisi just said is one of the strongest reasons also why decolonization will be almost impossible. I don't say it's impossible because it's possible, but seem almost impossible. Because how are you talking about decolonization when you're looking at the colonizers to publish your journals?
Yes.
Like your papers. So like they are the one that scrutinize the knowledge you produce. So
we have a Journal of Development in Africa or something, which is good. They should keep working hard.
There are a lot of journals in Africa.
And one day it will become high impact.
Trying to find the journal that is outside of Africa.
Yeah, we would support these journals, please.
Because of time, I'm going to just end with one statement. I think that for us to decolonize social work practice, social work education, or any other discipline, I think we should start by trying to decolonize our mind. If we don't decolonize our mind, there is no way we can decolonize anything outside of it. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you continue to like and subscribe and share what you think. What do you think can be done to decolonize social work, psychology, sociology, and all the logies and all of them? See you.
Follow us and share our video. Bye.